Economic Council, Bharat Ramamurti. Thank you so much for joining us on Yahoo Finance this morning. So we did see with this really unexpected jobs number here, the president taking a victory lap here, tweeting that 12.7 million jobs since he took office. What are your biggest takeaways from this jobs report, and especially when you think of where we were in the thick of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's another very strong jobs report, one of several in a row at this point. I feel like every time I come on after a jobs report, we're talking about how we're beating expectations. And I think that's really the story of this economy. We've been beating expectations now month after month, year after year. To me, the headlines are 3.4% unemployment, the lowest since 1969, 50 years plus. The lowest black unemployment at 4.7% that we've ever had in recorded history in this country. And all of that power in the labor market, alongside the fact that annual inflation has come down now for 9 consecutive months. So overall, I think a very strong picture of where the economy is.
And as we look at how the jobs have been spread across the sectors, we did see a very strong showing from the services sector and a lot of the sectors that were hard hit by the pandemic. But how evenly distributed should this be at this point?
Well, I think that month to month, you're seeing different sectors of the economy show strength. And one thing that we've liked to highlight is that the manufacturing sector overall, since the president has come into office, has shown incredible strength. 800,000 jobs created in manufacturing out of the 12.7 million created under this president. And I think a reflection of the president's economic approach, which is to build more things here, to move as much of our supply chain onshore as we can so we're not as vulnerable as we were during the pandemic, and in the process create really good, high-quality jobs.
Obviously, this is coming at a time when we're still in the thick of high inflation here, core PCE still high. The Fed now having something of a balancing act here. Is it going to take a recession, though, to get labor force participation up to pre-pandemic levels?
Well, actually, prime age labor force participation has exceeded pre-pandemic levels. Workers ages 25 to 54 are being attracted back into the labor force because it's a great time to get a job. Wages are going up across the board, particularly for those folks at the lower end of the income spectrum. And as a result, you're seeing people come off the sidelines and get into the labor force. We think that's a very positive story.
But for those outside of that bracket, it's still below pre-pandemic levels at the moment.
Well, sure. If you look at folks who are getting up there in age, maybe it hasn't recovered quite as much, I think in part because overall there's some financial security there that means that they don't need to get back into the labor force. I think that's actually a good story to tell. But I think if you look at prime age workers, overall the story is very strong. And to get to your other question, no, we don't believe a recession is required to get the labor market back into check. We've already brought inflation down significantly over the past several months and at the same time added jobs. And I think we can continue to see that balancing act over the next several months.
Now, something else that's also coming up, a couple of debt ceiling scenarios. We saw that the White House laid out some possible projections as to the impact on the economy if it comes down to brinkmanship versus a short crisis or longer, short default or protracted default here. When you look at some of these figures here, though, I mean, do we have an idea about what is the most likely scenario at this point?
Well, look, it's Congress's responsibility, as it has been for decades now, to address the debt ceiling and take the possibility of default off the table. As you noted, the Council of Economic Advisors did an analysis of what would happen if we defaulted. And in basically every scenario, it's devastating. We're talking about an immediate recession. We're talking about millions of job losses. We're talking about interest rates spiking and higher costs for mortgages, for credit cards, for small business loans. It would undo a lot of the incredible progress we've made over the last 2 years. And it's completely self-inflicted and unnecessary. It's a crisis provoked by House Republicans who are threatening to default unless they get their extreme partisan agenda, massive spending cuts to programs that working families rely upon. And that's why the president has been clear. Let's take the possibility of default off the table. And then he's perfectly happy, just as he did last year, to have a conversation with both Democrats and Republicans about tax policy and spending policy in our budget.
And we know the president will be traveling shortly. So in terms of the number of days to get this done, a deal done by the X date, are we looking perhaps at not seeing this done? I mean, we know that this debt ceiling has been raised every time since 1960, 78 times been raised. Is there a scenario where we don't meet that X date?
Look, it's Congress's responsibility to get this done. As our OMB director said yesterday, it would take about 5 minutes to write a bill and put it on the floor of the House of Representatives that took the possibility of default off the table without conditions. We could pass it and get it done and begin those discussions about our two different visions for tax and spending policy in this country. The complexity here is not getting the debt ceiling raised and taking default off the table. It's that House Republicans are trying to use the possibility of a global economic crisis as a bargaining chip to ram through spending cuts that are wildly unpopular and that will be devastating to the economy.
And obviously this is coming at a time the Fed is trying to balance what it's doing to hone in on the bank crisis, get some financial stability going. So in terms of your economic outlook for the rest of the year, I mean, the consumer can only hang on for so long with inflation still so high. What is the economic outlook that you're seeing for the rest of the year?
Look, I think we need to get past the possibility of default, take that off the table, remove that uncertainty that is clouding the economy right now. Again, we think that the latest data that we have shows an economy that is in extremely strong shape with a lot of new investment coming down the pike. Remember, the infrastructure bill that the president passed into law, the Inflation Reduction Act and the clean energy tax credits that includes, the CHIPS Act, which is going to provide new investment in American semiconductor manufacturing. A lot of that is still to come. And as that investment hits the economy, I think we're going to see continued economic tailwinds.
We'll certainly be tracking that. We do thank you for joining us this morning. Bharat Ramamurti, Deputy Director of the National Economic Council. Thank you for your time this morning.